Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ep.4 of Chatting Cinema. I'm Flynn,
I'm Gianni.
and today we're going to start off. Gianni has brought with him a list of sequels considered better than the original. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and so we're going to take a look at this list and see what our opinions are as far as if it surpasses the previous film.
cool. All right, let's start their number one list. This is from an IMDb poll of the top 25 sequels better than the original. Number one is The Dark Knight.
Yes.
I think,
Yeah.
we would agree with that. Love The Dark Knight.
That's pretty easy for me. I think that, and it's not any problem with Batman Begins. It's just that I think that The Dark Knight is like a seminal film. I think that Christopher Nolan improves on the world that he's using because there's so much in Batman Begins with Ra's al Ghul, and he just gets to solely focus on Gotham and the criminal underworld of there, and it has Heath Ledger in it, and Heath Ledger gives one of the best performances of all time as the Joker. So yeah, I think it pretty much tops it in every way.
Yeah, and don't forget Aaron Eckhart as
Yeah,
Two-Face. I mean, he plays a great
fantastic.
Harvey Dent. Hans Zimmer improves on the score in The Dark Knight, I believe. Introduce a little anarchy is
Yeah,
like, still sends chills down my spine. Yeah, we love The Dark Knight.
yeah.
Number two on their list is the Terminator 2, Judgment Day.
Okay, I would agree with this. I think it's closer than Dark Knight.
Okay, yeah,
I think that Terminator 2 is it doesn't improve in every way in Terminator 1. I think that Terminator 1 sets up a fascinating world that Terminator 2 builds upon. But yeah, I would say edges it out a little bit, and then the franchise ends there.
okay. Yeah, I don't remember too much of the first Terminator film, so I'm going to go ahead and say, sure, Terminator 2 is better. Number three on their list, Star Wars Episode 5,
Yeah.
Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, this is sort of the sequel that everybody brings up when there's a big franchise and they're looking to continue. Everybody brings up the Empire factor
Yeah,
and whether Empire is better. Yeah, I think it is. The stakes are higher. We find our heroes in more interesting situations. I think that everybody has grown into their role just a little bit more. It's more collaborative than A New Hope. So I do think that Empire, and it ends on a fantastic cliffhanger. The story elements are better. Everything is sort of like working in full gear in Empire.
yeah. And I think we'll definitely get into this in our retrospective series
Absolutely.
that we're doing. But, I mean, I think A New Hope had to build a whole world, right? They had a lot to build there, and Empire really expands on that. And like you said, we find our heroes in more interesting situations. They're more developed now,
Mhm.
and it's definitely a darker story than
Yep.
the first one. And it's definitely has a lot of shocks in the story too. We have the whole Darth Vader is Luke's father,
Spoilers.
all of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Spoilers. Yeah, Empire's great. I'm gonna jump down a little further here to
Okay.
one that I think is interesting. Prisoner of Azkaban,
Okay. Yeah.
better than the original.
So it's interesting because Empire obviously is the fifth Star Wars movie in the chronological canon, but it was the first direct sequel to Star Wars. It was the second overall Star Wars movie. Prisoner of Azkaban is interesting because it's the third movie, um, and it's in a franchise of 8 that has been planned as 8 and has books backing it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're considering this a sequel to Chamber of Secrets or Sorcerer's Stone. Um, I do tend to agree that Prisoner of Azkaban is probably the best Harry Potter movie. I'm partial to Order of the Phoenix because I like that story the most. But Prisoner of Azkaban is really important because Alfonso Cuarón comes in, and Sorcerer's Stone and Chamber of Secrets are basically filmed using the books as scripts. Not much has changed. And I do think Chamber of Secrets builds on Sorcerer's Stone in that Sorcerer's Stone is filmed as a book. So there's not a lot of like breathing room
Yeah.
and room to grow. And Chris Columbus builds on that in Chamber of Secrets, and it feels a lot more open, and Hogwarts feels a little bit more real. more fleshed out. Not the Sorcerer's Stone isn't great too, but Prisoner of Azkaban I think is probably the most important Harry Potter movie, because it's the first movie where Alfonso Cuarón comes in and sort of gives a little filmmaker freedom. And this is when the books are getting a little bit longer. Prisoner of Azkaban isn't that much longer than Chamber of Secrets and Sorcerer's Stone, around 100 pages, I think. But we're starting to get to a point with Prisoner of Azkaban where you can't just take the book and make it the movie. So a lot of people think best. I will say most important.
Okay.
So I guess agree.
Yeah. No, I agree too. It's probably better than Sorcerer's Stone and Chamber of Secrets. My favorite Harry Potter movie is The Goblet of Fire, though. But The Prisoner of Azkaban had a lot to do, and Movies with Mikey on YouTube does a really good episode on Prisoner of Azkaban and how much of a risk that was for Warner Brothers, because they were taking a bet on Alfonso Cuarón to come in and take their source material. And like you said, he has a lot more freedom with the movie. And he really delivered with it, I think.
Yeah,
So,
Prisoner of Azkaban is great, and I think it has one of the most interesting Harry Potter stories.
yeah.
It's the one Harry Potter where Voldemort is present throughout the franchise, but he sort of takes a back seat. In this one, when we're focusing on Sirius Black and who we think he is throughout the whole movie and how that changes, is one of the most interesting dynamics in all of Harry Potter, and I think they really nailed that.
Yeah,
So.
agree. I think this one's kind of a no-brainer. I think it's universally agreed upon that Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, is better than the original.
Yeah,
I think so.
Alfred Molina is great as Doc Ock, and sort of going back into what we were talking about Star Wars in a little bit. Like when you have a franchise like this, actors are able to grow into their characters. The same is true of Prisoner of Azkaban, like we were just discussing. And so Toby is a little bit more comfortable as Spider-Man. I would agree that Spider-Man 2 is the peak of that franchise.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do a couple more here. Okay, Revenge of the Sith. Better than, I guess they mean Phantom Menace in that trilogy.
Yeah,
which
it's better than both.
Yeah.
Revenge of the Sith is it probably feels like the most complete movie out of the prequels.
Because that's the one they wanted to make the whole time.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and so the action is better. We're at a point where the CGI is a little bit better, and what they're doing with the CGI isn't as big a stretch. Like Grievous still looks really good, I think.
Yeah.
Ben, we'll get more into that in our retrospective this week of Revenge of the Sith.
This Wednesday.
But again, like a lot of these has been really surprising because a lot of people, I think, have this general idea like, oh, the sequel's never better. But I think a lot of these are kind of like very much improvements of their predecessors. So it's interesting to look at sequels that all of these, I think, we've agreed have been better than the original.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so what is your favorite sequel that's better than the original?
Favorite sequel that's better than the original? I lean Dark Knight. We opened up on it. I hate to pick one from the list, but Dark Knight is the one that I'll always come back to. It's been one of my favorite movies of all time since seeing it, and it's one of these movies that, you revisit and you think like, it can't really be that good, right?
Right.
And then you watch it again and you're like, no, it is. It's that good.
Yeah.
Dark Knight works on every level. Everybody's great in it. Christopher Nolan is just like masterful during this movie. And it's funny because that kind of drops off in Dark Knight Rises, I think. But for The Dark Knight, it's just so good. And I think that to pick my favorite sequel, I would want it to be one that's sort of like better in every way. And I think that Dark Knight takes what was a really good foundation in Batman Begins and just dials it up to 11.
Yeah. Going off of that, I think that my favorite sequel has to be Blade Runner 2049. Denis Villeneuve, he came in to that and he really treated the original with so much respect. Mm-hmm. And I think that's another movie that really shouldn't have worked.
Yes.
Kind of like what Prisoner of Azkaban shouldn't have worked, right? But it did. Denis Villeneuve came in and Warner Brothers gave him a lot of freedom
Mhm.
too, right? And I think it was just that movie is just
Yeah.
something else. It's 3 hours long, and you're never bored. And everything is intentional. Everything is there for a reason. And Ryan Gosling, Harrison Ford coming back, to Deckard. I mean, it's just really, it's
Yeah.
it's a great movie.
I absolutely
But
adore Blade Runner 2049, and I'm not sure if this is an unpopular opinion to prefer Blade Runner 2049 to the original,
yeah,
because the original is a masterpiece and sort of set forth this neo-noir aesthetic that's been
yeah,
applied to so much science fiction. But like you were saying, this movie should not exist, and I'm so glad it did. I don't know where Warner Brothers found it and thought, okay, Blade Runner came out, it didn't make any money. It wasn't really for like the general cinema audiences. People weren't going out in droves to see it. I
right.
mean, it didn't get a DVD release until almost a decade later, I think,
Yeah,
and that's where it found new life. So they sort of went to this cult hit, which obviously has been super influential, and thought, okay, we'll do it again, and this time it'll work. And gave Denis Villeneuve hundreds of millions of dollars to make this
and then the
movie.
movie didn't make that much
Yeah,
money,
and
which is
then the
insane.
same exact thing happened,
Yeah,
and it wasn't for audiences that it's very hard to market something like that.
yeah,
But it's phenomenal, and I love late 2010s Harrison Ford's career is just begrudgingly revisiting characters from his prior career and still knocking it out of the park every time,
yeah,
because
yeah.
he's great in this movie.
He is.
Everybody's great in that movie.
Yeah.
And it's gorgeous, and it won Roger Deakins his first cinematography
Yeah.
Oscar, because people would have rioted if it didn't, because that movie you can watch it on mute and
Yeah.
still enjoy it because of how pretty it is. Yeah, great sequel.
Yeah. 10 out of 10. Can't wait for Dune.
Yeah.
um, all right. So we wanted to kind of end this episode with our favorite and least favorite theater experiences. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. I'll start with least favorite, so we can end the episode on a more positive note.
Deal.
So, for me, a least favorite theater experience should be a couple things. It should obviously the audience experience should not be enjoyable. And I think for me, because I've had some bad theater experiences with good movies, and overall that's trumped by how much I enjoyed the movie. Like I went to the midnight premiere of Deathly Hallows Part 1, and I had to sit in the front seat. My neck was craned the whole time. I was surrounded by some questionable characters. But I love that movie so much that it in the end, that's what I remember. So my least favorite theater experience was going to see David Ayer's Suicide Squad, for a couple reasons. So I went opening night. I had heard some things from critics that got to see it a little early, but I was still holding out hope. I thought the marketing campaign for that movie was really good. I was really excited for it. The trailers really sold me. And I got to the theater, and it was packed. So I don't think there was an empty seat in that theater. And so I sat down, surrounded by people, and the movie starts, and you find out pretty quickly, in my opinion, that Suicide Squad is not a great movie. So I was just sitting there, and I was really disappointed because I really wanted to like this movie, but like right off the bat, I didn't. And so when something like that happens, when you kind of like discover, oh, I'm not gonna like this movie, you just have to sit there like you're a prisoner to whatever's happening on the screen. So I just had to sit there disappointed, and the packed theater is kind of feeling it, and I'm like, am I the jerk? Am I the one that's not getting this? I don't think I was. I think a lot of people don't like Suicide Squad. But the full theater mixed with the audience reaction, mixed with my feelings for the movie, definitely produced a memorable, albeit awful, theater experience.
All right. My least favorite theater experience has to be I was pressured into seeing Insidious: The Last Key when that
Okay.
came out. That came out last year,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to see it.
Okay.
I had seen reviews for it; they weren't so great,
Mhm.
but nonetheless, I went to see it. And of course, you ran into everything that I think people run into in a horror movie theater,
Mm.
which is people saying, "Oh, don't open that door,"
Right.
or just the things like that, and people just screaming obscenities at the screen. But this is a film; we're all watching a movie. We need to respect it. And the thing is, I left the movie thinking that wasn't too bad.
R-
Like, I think Insidious: The Last Key is one of the more underrated films in that franchise. I think Lynn Shay delivers a great performance, but it was hard to see her performance and respect her performance
Mm.
when so many people were disrespecting her performance. Uh, it was an interesting dynamic, and a really, I think that's probably the worst experience I've had.
Yeah.
Conversely, though, one of the best theater experiences I've had where people were cheering and excited and happy and screaming obscenities at
Mhm.
the screen, crying, screaming no, was Avengers Endgame, right?
Mhm.
I think that's probably the definitive theater experience
Yeah.
for me. I was surrounded by people I didn't know, but we were all on this ride together, and I was screaming things. You
Right.
know what I mean? It got to that point. So, what about you?
Yeah, and to hit on Endgame, it's such an interesting the two films you picked are such an interesting dynamic of when is it okay to react
Right.
to a movie, because this conversation sort of spiraled out of Endgame. Like, is it okay to be screaming at the theater? And I think that you have to look at the film you're going into and look at the fact that it's opening night and people have been waiting, and I think that you probably know what to expect as far as reactions like that. And I had a similar experience and I really loved it, versus if I saw Endgame again a couple weeks later and people were still doing that, I'd be like, all right, you have Twitter, you know what's going on. My favorite movie theater experience, I had to think, because I have a lot. I love going to see movies. I love being in movie theaters. But one stood out, and it was seeing Star Wars: The Force Awakens for the first time. So 2015, Star Wars came out. The marketing for Disney Star Wars, I will say, of the main saga films, has been so good in telling you why you want to see this movie, but not telling you anything about it. And I think that's a really hard balance to strike, and I think they've gotten it right every single time. So I've seen the trailers for Star Wars. I've loved the trailers. I think it looks great. I'm excited. I've seen early reactions. People are saying Star Wars back. Everything's great. But I was still really nervous. In fact, I love buying like Star Wars merch and figures and stuff like that. And I didn't buy anything before Force Awakens except for one Finn Funko Pop in the Stormtrooper outfit, because I was terrified, because you read all these horror stories online of everybody that has like Power of the Force Jar Jar Binks figures sealed in their attic, and I was like, I don't want to end up like that. I'm just gonna wait to see the movie, see if I like it. It's a good rule of thumb. So I was nervous, and theater's packed. You have that like anxious energy. Everybody's sort of not knowing what to expect, not knowing whether they'll like it or not knowing whether is Star Wars back, or is this like the prequels where people are going to be mad and get upset. And then it started, and you still feel that. And the moment for me when I knew was when Poe fires a laser at Kylo Ren and he stops it with the Force.
Mm.
Right there, and that's the very beginning of the movie, and I was like, oh no, okay, Star Wars is back. So it's sort of the inverse of Suicide Squad, where I knew very early into Suicide Squad, I'm probably not going to like this movie by the time it ends. At the very beginning of Force Awakens, I was like, oh no, I think I'm into this. So I watched the movie just overjoyed. I think that Force Awakens is so much fun. And then I got out of the theater and just talked in ecstasy with the people I was with. Like, man, Star Wars is back. That movie's so good. I can't wait to go see it 6 more times in theaters,
Yeah.
because it was such a fun experience, and everybody in my audience really liked it. So that sticks out to me as being a really memorable, really positive theater experience.
Yeah, really good stuff. So I think that wraps it up for this Monday.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be back on Wednesday with our Revenge of the Sith retrospective. Looking forward to that. You
Yeah.
can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, anywhere you get a podcast. And that does it for me and Flynn, Chatting Cinema. We'll see you guys on Wednesday.
Yep. Thank you once again to SSTV for allowing us to use the studio and record there. It's greatly appreciated. We'll see you to talk some Star Wars on Wednesday.
Yeah.